For most of the world, and certainly for us, this abominable invasion has been very hard to understand, especially at this time and age. One would have thought that this would have never happened.
It is a marvelous opportunity to see the faces of Ukrainian people, of the heroic people of Ukraine that have been doing what you have been doing in the way you have been doing it. It is absolutely admirable.
I must say from the very beginning, I think that this nation has no towels to throw onto the ring. What we have is our deep understanding that this war cannot be stopped, but it can be won. And this is why all our guys and girls are fighting in the trenches. All our diplomats, and I belong to Ukrainian diplomats, are doing everything possible to get to Ukraine more modern weapon, more sanctions, and more financial support from the institutions and allies. And the whole Ukrainian society has put away their own businesses and started volunteering to help the army and to help the guys on the front line. So Ukrainian nation is being born again for the third time within the last two decades. But now we are fighting a war of independence, and we must win this war.
I think when people in other countries look at the war, they think of wars over territory or a war over some particular issue. And this is a war of existence. Russia and their leader, Putin, have announced that they don't believe Ukraine or Ukrainians as a culture, as a history, as a people, as a language exists. They are trying to eradicate the existence of Ukraine and Ukrainians. That is their announced, discussed on their television constantly. That is their strategy. And so there is no way to do anything other than defend your homeland and your existence to the very bitter last moment, because there is no other solution. There is no territorial solution. There is no separate law that allows for another language solution. All of those things have been ongoing for decades. And frankly speaking, and many in Latin America will understand this Russian imperialism, this colonialism is hundreds of years old. Peter the Great attempted to eliminate the existence of the Ukrainian language. Putin compares himself to Peter the Great. And so what we have is a situation where Ukrainians can't throw in the towel, as you said and Alexei said, because that would be acknowledging that we don't exist. And we do exist, we're here.
As for the previous historical background, yes, formally, Soviet Union was a federation of different so-called independent states, and they did this due to some official and diplomatic acts, reasons. For example, to have more votes in the United Nations and so on. But mentally, we had the federation led and run by Russian nation, Russian superiority, and all other peoples, all other nations considered as minor ones, with minor culture, with minor mentality. And this is the quite pure imperialistic paradigm, maybe the last one in modern world, but I mean the whole world need to fight and overcome this paradigm and to diminish it forever, and to put the values of individuals, the values of independence, and the values of the equality of all nations as the key value for the further development.
We at Aspen, we talk a lot about values. And when we talk about values, we talk not about some declarations somebody would like to show or express. we talk about actions and we understand values as a mechanism how you take this or those decisions. So it's not what you say, it's how you act, like Americans and British said, like walk the talk. So for us, why it's all horror started, I do believe it's existential question of values which dominates in these two societies. Even though we had like some historical common events, like we are so different, Ukrainians and Russians, based on values we live and the way how we live. And like, I do believe that Putin, and it's not about Putin itself, it's about the like big part of Russian society, like dominant part of Russian society. They simply cannot accept our desire to live free, just, equitable, like life with dignity. They cannot accept that we don't want to be back to the Soviet communistic times, and we would like to live like European, like it's close to us, like European, Western values oriented, like human values oriented life. So I think that's an existential problem and difference between two societies. And I'm here to talk about a bit of civil society's role in this war. And as was mentioned before, like I think the key factor of our resilience and our like resistance is mobilization of the whole society. So when this like full escalation, this new phase of war started, each Ukrainian, he like from one side, he felt this existential threat, like addressed personally to each Ukrainian, just because you're Ukrainian. And from another side, each of us felt that we just need to do something to protect our values of freedom by actions. And it's so different that to what's happening in Russia, because like even within Aspen community in Ukraine, during first 2.5 or 3 weeks, a lot of us, we focused our efforts trying to reach out Russian society and tell them, look, this horror is going on in Ukraine right now. Look, kids are getting killed. Look, your soldiers are raping our women and burning them afterwards. We're trying to tell them the truth, just trying to like wake them up. But it like no result. No result. Propaganda, yes, partially propaganda, like brainwashing, yes. But like in this moment, it really doesn't even matter, because we have like a society which really supports this terror. And that's a big difference. And that's what it's really important to understand. And that's why we are doing all these events, simply to tell the motivation and the real like substance of what is going on, and why it's not about like the negotiation process, not, and like they will never stop, because these values, which are so important for us, are so like far away and not shared by their society.
This is long before the war. I think that's what people need to understand. Ukrainians have understood, because it's a neighbor next door, how different these societies are. And they've made their choice year after year after year, decade after decade now. Russians don't enjoy any freedom of religion, for example. And Ukrainians enjoy broad freedom of religion. To believe, not believe, mosques, synagogues, evangelicals, Roman Catholic, Orthodox, multiple Orthodox church, you name it. There's a Mormon tabernacle in Kiev. Mormons are illegal in Russia. We know what that freedom is. Freedom of speech, freedom of the media and the press. There has been none in Russia, and we have complete freedom now, especially with the internet, of speech and press and civil society in Ukraine. We see journalists murdered in Russia year after year for speaking out against the regime.
I would like just to mention that at this moment about 40,000 women are fighting with arms now, fighting and protecting us and protecting the territory of Ukraine and the existence of Ukraine. It's a huge amount. It's unbelievable to have such amount in Russia, for example. And this is all today's processes are not occasional. This is a continuation of historical and traditional and of our cultural pattern, and our difference between these culture, Russian and Ukrainian. You could ask every ordinary Ukrainian man, and this is not strange for him, for this ordinary man, that about the huge role of a woman in every field of everyday life. It's natural for our history, yeah, because we had a lot of freedoms for women for ages, and only some Russian tradition, some religion Russian tradition put some burdens and limits to women development and to role of women in society, in family, and so on.
Look, it all started back in the years when the Americans started providing us with very important high-precision anti-tank equipment, so-called javelins, and the Brits started providing our army with NLAWs. This was exactly the thing we needed by the beginning of this large-scale invasion. Second important element was that after we pushed Russians back from my hometown and from our capital, Kiev, the needs have changed. And we approached all the partners to get more armored vehicles and artillery. So now, actually, we are in that phase of war, which is an artillery war. And Russians have upper hand because their stocks are really immense. What we managed to do is to get first Western equipment, Western howitzers. Now Western countries start providing us with multiple launch rocket systems. This is very important, and with high precision anti-ship rockets, which helps us in having Russian pushed away from Odessa and from our coast. So what we need most now is the anti-aircraft defense systems, because just imagine every day from 10 to 15 cruise missiles are being fired upon our cities and critical and civilian infrastructures.
So let me think. 8 years ago when this war began, and in February of 2014 with the illegal occupation and annexation of Crimea, we had no military. The previous administration had in essence eliminated it. There had been a Russian national managing the Ministry of Defense. They'd sold off. All we had left were either battered and or spare parts, if anything, in terms of equipment. There had been no true training. And so it's over these 8 years in response to this war, but as clearly necessary, that a true military was built. The US, Canada, and Britain helped us to train our soldiers. The entire Ukrainian military has been receiving a substantial amount of Ukrainian funds since 2015. 5% of GDP has gone towards national security, meaning the Ministry of Interior, the National Guard, and the Army, the Armed Forces. And what you see today, that incredibly brave, courageous, thoughtful, well-organized, disciplined army, is an army that was built over the last 8 years in the throes of a war that has been ongoing in the East for those 8 years. And so, yes, the Western military support is absolutely necessary that Oleksiy was describing, and I see he's back. But not only was that, I mean, you couldn't put it into the hands of a military that didn't know how to function. That equipment is capable of helping and giving us the edge because of the military that was built over the 8 years by Ukrainians, and the sacrifice has been made by them to do this in a way that, as you're seeing, is very different than the Russian military. The second largest military in the world seems to have, morale problems, seems to have management problems, seems to have a lack of training for many. The conscripts that they're using seem to be not trained properly. So it may be an overwhelming force physically in numbers, but you have an overwhelming sense of duty, patriotism, commitment, and professionalism in the Ukrainian army, which is balancing this out together with those Western armaments.
You could just to compare two pictures of Donetsk that was occupied by Russians since 2014, and if they said that we organized a terror in Donbas region, but please compare the picture of Donetsk, more or less nice city now, and the picture of Mariupol after being liberated by Russians. So this is only the pretext and the inventions, the mythology, yes, the fairy tale they are using to justify this so-called special military operation.
I just want to remind everyone that this war began 8 years ago. I think what happened is it fell off the news radar screens of the world. And so if you ask if Ukrainians were surprised, the only thing anyone can be surprised is with the murderous, barbaric tools that have been used against civilians. I think no one could in their right mind expect rape of 10-month-old children. So that you could never expect, you could never conceive of the type of barbarism that is being delivered upon the Ukrainian people.